When the Vox picked up voices from men long executed, we knew Mornviel IX had broken one of the Emperor's laws of death. I was Commissar Erastes Vale, and by decree of the Ordo Obscurus I was bound to the 301st Penal Legion, men stripped of rank, name, and future, cast into service where only ash and silence had reigned for centuries. The transport's descent shook as we pierced the upper storms, static and grit battering the hull until it howled like tortured steel. Through the slit of the command viewport, I glimpsed the planet's surface, a wasteland of endless black drifts, frozen in motion as though the very air had solidified. Nothing grew here, nothing moved. Yet the banners of regiments long forgotten jutted from dunes, their cloth rigid as if fresh painted and hardened into permanence. The men of the 301st muttered beneath their breath, litanies half-remembered from worlds they would never see again. I enforced silence with a glance. Discipline was the only weapon sharper than the last rifles they carried. Ash muffled every sound as we disembarked, swallowing our boots, turning each step into an echo without source. Even the engines of the Chimera transport seemed subdued, their growl choked to a whisper beneath the planetary pall. Our mission was stated plainly: reoccupy the derelict fortress hive of Sanctus Ferrum, lost during the last recorded compliance centuries ago. Reoccupation meant cleansing, fortification, and reactivation of its Vox relays. Yet before we had crossed a mile of the surface, the Vox itself broke faith. At first it was static, then fractured syllables, then the full names of men whose records I had personally reviewed before embarkation. Names of those executed long ago in other legions, dishonored in crimes long purged by blood. The men froze, some recognizing comrades they had once fought beside. I kept them moving with threat and pistol drawn, though the hairs on my neck bristled as my own name hissed through the static, elongated into ritual chant. The storm thickened, curling around us in pale coils that slithered like smoke. The Vox operators swore blind their sets were powered down, yet the voices persisted. Every attempt to jam the signal failed. Adept Marix, our senior Mechanicus attaché, bent over the unit and pronounced the frequency impossibly unassigned. "No channel," he whispered, Binharik cant lacing his words. Yet every channel. The ashfall intensified as we neared the hive's gates, dunes rising like tides. The fortress loomed, a black silhouette without light, its towers crowned by steel teeth. No windows cut its flanks, no apertures broke the curtain of wall, sealed as though the hive itself rejected vision. Men shivered, not from cold, but from the oppressive weight pressing down on us, like a hand closing over the legion entire. We established first camp beneath that shadow, awning stretched against ash drift. Fires sputtered, flames dim, and smoke absorbed by the air. The men's murmurs were swallowed almost before they left their mouths. I forced them into formation prayers, their voices ragged but necessary to reassert order. The Vox units rested at the camp's center, muted, watched by tech adepts. For a time, only static muttered in low waves, like a sea we could not see. Then, with no warning, clarity cut through. The voice was my own. Calm, precise. Carrying the ritual cadence of judgment, it issued command for the execution of Trooper Halleck. By my order. By lasbolt to the skull. Sanctioned by the seal of the commissariat. The words matched the style of decrees I had uttered 100 times. Yet I had never given this one. Halleck was alive, trembling at my side, his eyes fixed on the Vox that condemned him with my tone. Others turned toward me, fear and doubt coiled together. I did not move, for the unit continued, repeating line for line the command in flawless mimicry. Halleck wept, clutching his weapon as though to beg for absolution. I drew my bolt pistol in ritual precision, chambered round clacking like the toll of a bell, every gaze fixed on me. Discipline demanded clarity, yet behind the words echoed a deeper resonance, a promise that all judgment had already been spoken, all sentences already carried out. The unit ceased with sudden finality. Silence fell, thicker than ash, heavier than dread. No man breathed. I lowered my pistol, though my hand shook despite iron training. Somewhere beyond the sealed walls of Sanctus Ferrum, unseen mouths whispered my own decrees back to me, as if the planet itself remembered my sins more clearly than I. And then the Vox crackled alive again, not static this time, but the sound of footsteps, measured and heavy, as though patrols of unseen men marched toward our camp from the hollow hive. We strained to listen. The sound grew louder, though no figures approached, each step perfectly timed, echoing in cadence older than memory. I ordered a watch doubled, rifles primed, prayers recited through gritted teeth. But deep inside, I knew. Those were not echoes of the past, nor phantoms of Vox. They were rehearsals of a march we ourselves would one day join. The sound of phantom marching did not fade with the night. It carried us forward, compelling us toward the gates of Sanctus Ferrum, as though the fortress itself had summoned us. The outer bastions rose above the ash like a mountain of blackened steel, unbroken by aperture or ruin. I had expected collapse, decay, the usual hollow bones of a hive left to centuries of silence. Instead, its walls gleamed faintly beneath the pallid light, adamantium sheathing fused seamless and immaculate. No cracks, no scars of bombardment, no apertures for defense or sight. A fortress without windows, blind in form yet watchful in presence. The gates themselves loomed 20 meters high, sculpted with forgotten heraldry worn smooth by ash storms. When the adepts applied their charges, the blasts vanished against the surface, without mark. Only when the gates parted of their own accord, groaning as though exhaling breath, did passage grant itself. I admit this truth plainly. None among us gave the order, nor pressed the rune. The hive willed itself open. We entered in formation, columns staggered, rifles up, eyes scanning for ambush. Penal legionnaires are not bred for courage, yet desperation steals them better than faith. Even so, each man stiffened at the threshold, as if stepping into the fortress meant stepping out of the Emperor's sight. The air within was warmer, humid with metallic tang, the taste of rust thick on the tongue though no rust was seen. Our boots struck stone, yet the echoes did not fade as they should. Each impact repeated again and again, hollow resonances darting through unseen corridors until they returned amplified, mocking the original. Chaplains declared the place a sanctum defiled, naming the sealed walls eyelids of stone. They recited litanies against sightless eyes, fragments of prayers remembered imperfectly. Their voices cracked, and their words seemed to dissipate as though consumed. Still, the men took solace in ritual, crossing themselves in awkward, hurried motions. I observed, silent. Faith was weapon, but so was discipline, and both felt brittle here. Squads fanned through the antechambers, clearing each chamber with methodical sweeps. The rooms were vast, but barren. No furnishings, no corpses, no dust. Walls gleamed faintly as though freshly polished, yet left no reflection. Every corner felt too sharp, every hallway too precise, angles designed for geometry rather than habitation. The absence of decay was more unsettling than ruin. It suggested presence, maintenance, a caretaker unseen. I advanced with the command element, following the path of Squad Marin as they moved deeper. Their Vox reports returned clean, though their voices sounded distant, slowed, as if dragged through water before reaching us. They confirmed no contact, only long corridors without branching. Yet, as we pressed further, men began to mutter that they were observed. Not watched from above, nor from shadow, but from within the walls themselves. Their knuckles whitened on laser guns, eyes scanning blank surfaces as if expecting the steel to peel back and reveal eyes beneath. The fortress grew stranger with each step. Gun ports that should have lined battlements were sealed flush, as though never cut. Observation decks were present by design but windowless, denying vision of the outside world. Even ventilation shafts were fused closed, though the air circulated thickly, carrying that constant taste of metal. I could not shake the sense that the fortress breathed, exhaling in faint drafts from hairline seams too narrow for sight. Hours passed in methodical clearance, though time itself felt loose, minutes stretching unnaturally long between heartbeats. Adept Marex recorded fluctuations in chronometers, though he spoke of them with the detachment of one cataloging minor errors. Not heresy. I knew better. The Imperium's clocks are the Emperor's own heartbeat, and here it faltered. When Squad Marin pushed ahead into the lower halls, the sound of their movement reverberated differently. Their footsteps carried like drums, resounding through corridors far beyond their number. At first I thought it trick of stone, but when their cadence doubled, tripled, multiplied into the march of an entire regiment, even the priests fell silent. Their reports ceased moments later, cut short mid-phrase. We raised Vox again, demanding confirmation. Nothing but static, then silence. The men tensed, shifting in formation, weapons braced toward the black corridor. I ordered a forward sweep. Another squad advanced, but their boots struck the ground with no sound at all. Silence swallowed them whole, even as we watched them march. I knew then that the fortress played with sound as though it were clay, granting it, denying it, reshaping it. And then came the echo. Heavy, measured, exact. The footsteps of Squad Marin resounded from the corridors, but louder now, as though the men approached again. Yet no figures returned. No light cut the dark. Only the sound advanced, filling every hall, drawing nearer with perfect cadence. The echo of soldiers who had gone ahead, multiplied and magnified until it became the march of a legion unseen. The men braced, fingers tightening on triggers, yet I saw their faces blanch. For the echo was too strong, too sharp, carrying weight of boots we could not see. We had lost them, of that I was certain. But their march had not ceased. It continued, louder with each passing moment, as though the walls themselves carried their patrol back to us, not in flesh but in sound. The hollow corridors shook with their phantom return, and all we could do was wait, listening, as footsteps of the lost closed in from every direction at once. The phantom march swelled until the walls themselves seemed to vibrate with each invisible step, yet no living men returned. I ordered the companies to hold position, to fix bayonets and recite their litanies, but the sound simply passed around us, moved below us, and then faded into the foundations of Sanctus Ferrum. The fortress had swallowed Squad Marin whole, and returned only their echoes. Duty demanded pursuit. Discipline demanded that I show no fear. So we followed where the march had gone, downward. Hidden access ways revealed themselves as though they had always been waiting for us. Seamless panels in the floor withdrew with a hiss when pressed, revealing stairs cut directly into black stone. No adepts reported power signatures, yet lamps burned along the walls, their glow steady and cold, unpowered but eternal. The descent was long, spiraling into earth that had no right to be hollowed so perfectly. The air thickened with dust, though beneath the taste of ash came something sharper, a tang like copper pressed against the tongue. At last, the stairs opened into a chamber that dwarfed cathedrals I had seen on shrine worlds. Columns of stone reached into unseen heights, their surfaces inscribed not with scripture but with the intricate curves of Vox circuits, carved into the rock itself. Between them stood altars, hundreds, perhaps thousands, each one a crude shrine of twisted metal, adorned with broken Vox units. They were wired into nothing, but each hummed, alive with static that did not belong. The sound was unbearable at first, 1,000 voices clashing in broken harmony. Fragments of prayers bled into one another. High Gothic invocations, low Gothic battlefield chants, Binharic cants, even feral world war cries shaped into half-remembered psalms. None of the legionnaires understood all of them, but every man heard fragments in his own tongue. Words he had whispered once before battle, or screamed in confession before sentence. As the minutes passed, the babble began to resolve. Syllables aligned across dialects, tones bled into one another, until all voices spoke a single word: remain. The word struck like a hammer through marrow. Every altar, every vox, every throatless voice repeated it, cycling endlessly, a command without source. The legion shuddered under its weight. Several men dropped to their knees unbidden, pressing palms together in mock prayer. Others clutched their skulls, veins swelling in their temples as if pressure mounted inside. Nosebleeds spread like contagion. One trooper clawed his ears until they bled, yet still whispered the word between gasps. I ordered them to rise, to resist, to focus on their discipline. My voice sounded thin against the choir, a whisper compared to thunder. Even I felt the compulsion, a pressure behind the eyes, urging me to kneel, to bow, to submit to permanence. My hand rested on my bolt pistol more for certainty than use, metal against flesh grounding me. The chaplain staggered forward, raising icons, reciting counter-litanies against blasphemous resonance. Their words faltered quickly, absorbed into the rhythm of the choir. In less than a minute, even they whispered the forbidden syllable between their own prayers, their lips betraying them. Adept Marex examined the altars with trembling mechadendrites. He confirmed what we already knew but could not accept. No power, no fuel, no Vox towers linked to orbit. The altars broadcast without input, without reason. He murmured in binary, his tone uneven, as if something else replied within his data stream. When I demanded his report, he only whispered, "Remain." The deeper we moved into the chamber, the worse the effect became. Men developed tics, rapid blinking, stuttering motions in the jaw, fingers flexing in unison without command. The word echoed inside skulls as though carried by heartbeat. I saw hardened criminals of the 301st, men who had spat at scripture and laughed at sanctity, fall to their knees and clasp hands in desperate reverence. It was not faith that took them, but pressure, as if the act of kneeling eased some invisible burden crushing their bones. I considered ordering volleys to shatter the altars, but instinct stayed me. I felt in my marrow that destruction here would not cleanse but multiply. The fortress had not resisted our entry. It had opened willingly, let us down, brought us before this choir. It wanted us here. We pressed deeper into the chamber, forced by duty if not by will. The sound of marching still resounded ahead, mingled with the choir's chant. The missing squad was near, or something wearing them was. I felt it before we saw it. The subtle change in air pressure, the faint scrape of boots on stone. Then, from the far tunnel, shapes emerged, armor reflecting the pale light. It was Squad Marin, formation intact, laser guns slung as if returning from patrol. Their movements were correct, precise, almost ritual in cadence. Relief rippled through the ranks before faltering, for something in their stride was wrong. Too measured, too perfect, without fatigue, without variance. As they approached, helmets lifted toward us. Through the visors I expected eyes, fear, sweat, life. Instead there was nothing. Hollow blackness, helmets empty, yet voices issued from within, perfectly clear. They spoke as one, overlapping with the choir, their tone neither pleading nor hostile, but absolute. Remain. They stood before us in perfect ranks, armor intact, weapons slung with ceremonial precision, empty helms turned as if gazes still lingered within. The voices that came from them were not echoes this time, but speech, layered and deliberate, each syllable rolling like decree. They did not announce themselves as revenants or phantoms, but as soldiers of the Emperor, returned to duty. Their leader, or the one who stepped forward with mechanical poise, extended a gauntleted hand. Within it lay a scroll sealed in crimson wax. The twin-headed aquila pressed deep into parchment that looked older than any among us, yet unweathered by time. I received it with caution, my bolt pistol never lowering. When I broke the seal, my blood ran cold. The parchment bore the sigil of the High Lords of Terra, commanding the 301st to continue the crusade of Sanctus Ferrum into its depths, to purge heresy, and to remain until every trace was cleansed. The ink was flawless, the calligraphy unmistakable, the parchment authentic to every test my eyes and adept Marix's augurs could run. Yet the date stamped at the bottom placed it 4 centuries past. The men muttered. Some spat, others knelt. The chaplains insisted that divine providence had returned us to a duty never concluded, that the emperor had judged us worthy despite our sins. Yet I saw the truth etched in their trembling hands, the words "Remain," scratched into armor with knives, carved into the stone at their feet in rows of numbers repeating without end. None among us had etched those marks, yet they multiplied across walls even as we watched. Debate tore through the command cadre. Could revenants bear the authority of Terra? Could echoes of men be obeyed as though they still drew breath? The priests argued yes, for faith does not wither with flesh. The officers argued no, for orders centuries old and born by empty shells could not dictate the living. I said nothing at first, weighing discipline against dread, doctrine against instinct. The Imperium thrives on obedience to relic and tradition, yet here obedience felt less like duty and more like surrender. The revenants waited with patience unnatural. They did not advance, did not attack, only stood in ranks with weapons untouched. Yet every moment their voices whispered the same decree in unison. Remain. The word wormed into marrow, wore down resistance, turned thought itself into repetition. Men began muttering it without realizing, lips shaping syllables in rhythm with the revenants. I gave the order to hold fire. To annihilate them then might have preserved courage, but it might also have condemned us to destruction we could not comprehend. I sensed their numbers were not finite. If we burned this patrol, more would come. Endless ranks dredged from the choir beneath. Better to endure and learn their intent. It was Marix who broke the stalemate. His mechadendrites linked with the revenants' vox channels, extracting fragments of their signal. The adepts muttered Bin Harik as streams of corrupted data flashed across his displays. Fragments of voice, fractured images, orders repeated in infinite loops. Then he froze. His lenses dilated. His mechadendrites spasmed, and from his vox grill came a scream no human throat could shape. I tore the cables free with my own hand, pistol pressed to his chest in case corruption had claimed him. When at last he stilled, shuddering in metallic convulsions, he whispered in a voice like dust sliding over stone. He said the data contained recordings of his own death. He described it clearly. A lasbolt to the skull, his fall into ash, his mechadendrites twitching as he lay. Not in the distant future, not in vague prophecy, but in 5 days' time. The men recoiled. Some cursed, others laughed with terror. One tore off his helmet and struck his head against the wall as if to silence the thought. Yet when we turned our lamps upon that same wall, new scratches had appeared, deeper than the last. Rows of numbers, 5 by 5, each row identical, each digit burning into stone as though carved by unseen knives. They read the same as Marix's death date, repeated endlessly into the dark. The revenants did not move. They simply watched without eyes, their voices intoning one word, louder now, pulsing in rhythm with our own heartbeats. We took one of them alive, if the word could be bent enough to fit. It did not resist, even as the others watched in silence, their stares unbroken behind empty helms. A squad encircled it, binding its limbs in chains more suited to Ogrin's, dragging the revenant down the ash-slick corridors until we reached the makeshift sanctum the Mechanicus had carved from a Hablock shell. There, with rites whispered and litanies half forgotten, they began the autopsy. The first cut yielded nothing. No blood welled from the incision. No muscle twitched in protest. Beneath the ceramite plates, beneath the fabric of the undersuit, the revenant's flesh was gray, compacted like ash pressed into the shape of tissue. Where veins should have run, there were only hollow tunnels filled with cinders. Marex, recovered though trembling, drove his mechadendrites deeper. What he drew forth was neither sinew nor organ, but wire. Thin, coiled vox filaments threaded through bone as if marrow itself had been rewoven into a conduit. The chaplains declared it a blasphemy of form, a signal made flesh. The adepts insisted it was not flesh at all, but some echo of a human frame packed with transmission, life imitated by frequency. They stripped the skull and found no brain, only a cavity lined with copper strands, ash packed around them like insulation. Yet still the mouth moved, jaw clenching to the rhythm of a single word. The dissected revenant, organs absent, eyes hollow, continued to speak. Remain. The word rose in volume, though its lungs did not exist. Every vox channel within range distorted, screeching with the command at higher and higher decibels. The men cursed and clamped hands over their ears, but even silence brought no reprieve. The sound had slipped its machinery. It now lived inside skulls, matching the beat of hearts. Every pulse carried the word. Every breath carried its echo. Remain. Remain. I felt it too. At first it was a whisper at the edge of thought, a murmur mistaken for one's own memory. Then it sharpened, clear as command, each syllable striking in time with the thud of my veins. Some soldiers clutched their chests, convinced their hearts themselves had begun speaking. Others knelt involuntarily, as though the cadence bent their spines without consent. A few drew blades across their arms just to see if silence would bleed out. None came, only ash. The revenant on the table spasmed, though no blood fed its limbs. The wires writhed as if they sought new marrow. Marex barked prayers in Binharik, cauterizing each exposed thread with sparks from his mechadendrites, but still the figure twitched and mouthed. It took a bolt round through the skull to still its motions, though the jaw continued to clench on shattered fragments, soundless yet relentless. Outside, the fortress groaned. At first we thought it the echoes of our own machinery, but then the floor trembled, dust drifting down like snow from the sealed ceilings. The vibration thickened, spreading through boots and bones until the ground cracked beneath us. Men scrambled, weapons raised against no foe, as the stones split with a roar that drowned even the word in our skulls. The floor collapsed in spirals, as if the world itself obeyed some hidden design. Slabs of adamantium and stone fell away in perfect arcs, revealing not rubble or foundation but a stairwell carved in impossible precision. Each step descended without end, vanishing into black that seemed deeper than night itself. The air that rose from below was warm, metallic, carrying with it the faintest trace of whispers. Not through vox, not through thought, but through the marrow of our bones. The fortress had opened its throat, and it beckoned us downward. We began the descent in silence, though silence did not hold. Every boot that struck the stairs seemed to echo too long, as though sound itself hesitated to fall away. The stairwell coiled downward in perfect arcs, its geometry too precise for any human mason, each step a mirror of the last. The air grew warmer, metallic, yet still carried the dry grit of ash that rasped in the lungs. I ordered the squads to mark the walls with auspex beacons every 20 meters, but when we looked back, the beacons had shifted. Some glowed farther above us than we remembered placing them. Others flickered in positions we could not have passed without notice. Vox records began to betray us. What we judged as an hour's descent read on the machine logs as 12 minutes. A squad sent ahead for reconnaissance returned reporting only a short march, yet their armor plates were worn with scratches as though weeks had passed. One trooper's stubble had grown into a full beard. Another's skin sagged at the cheeks as if decades had pressed upon him. When they removed their helms, eyes bloodshot and rheumy blinked at me with confusion. Conversely, another soldier's voice cracked with youth, and his features had smoothed into those of a boy barely 15. They remembered nothing. Marex muttered in Binharic cant, noting chronotectonic instability, a term that dripped from his vox grill like oil. His data feeds glitched between past and present timestamps, cycling entries of events that had not yet occurred. One file recorded the squad's return 10 hours before we dispatched them. Another showed their deaths 3 days hence. He refused to read more. The priests interpreted the phenomenon as a trial. They raised their crozy high, declaring the stairwell a false reliquary, a mimic of sacred descent meant to break faith. They bellowed litanies of the Emperor's eternal constancy, voices trembling against the mutter of the steps. Yet the men did not echo the chants with their usual fervor. Instead, whispers spread, soldier to soldier, that the echoes we heard rising from below were not mere reverberations but foretellings. Some claimed they heard the bark of their own execution orders echoing upward, my voice speaking their names. Others swore they recognized the screams of their death cries, already carved into the air, awaiting their bodies to match them. I will not deny that I too heard my name carried in the rhythm of the stair, the syllables of Erastes Vale, whispered with cruel patience. My hand strayed off into my sidearm. We pressed on. The descent stretched hours, yet by the chronometers it was less than half of one. The men aged and regressed in uneven patterns, lines scoring some faces while others smoothed. The chaplains barked faith as shield. I barked order as anchor. Neither held fast. At last, the stair unfurled into a landing, vast and hollow, lit only by the sickly glow of our auspex lamps. Before us rose a door unlike any I had seen in fortress or shrine. It was fashioned of stone so black it consumed the light, absorbing it until even auspex readouts faltered. Across its surface crawled veins, living, pulsing faintly as though some colossal heart beat behind them. The rhythm of their throb matched our pulses, which by then already beat to the command that haunted us. The door waited, breathing. The door did not sit inert like any crafted barrier of stone or adamantium. It moved, almost imperceptibly, in the way a chest rises and falls with breath. The veins that ran across its surface swelled and contracted, their pulse echoing not only through the air, but within us. Every man present felt his own veins twitch, as though their rhythm had been seized by the thing before us. Some clutched their arms, veins rising beneath skin like snakes writhing toward escape. I forced them into formation, barked orders to still their tremors, yet my own wrist beat against the grip of my bolt pistol with alien insistence. The adepts approached first, Binharic litanies crackling from their vox grills as they initiated rites of access. Auspex probes mapped the surface. Cogitators churned, prayers mixed with equations. But every invocation died stillborn. No mechanism yielded. No hinge or lock revealed itself. Only the veins answered, glowing faintly where touched, their pulse quickening with the proximity of flesh. At Marex's command, one of his subordinates pressed a bare palm against the surface. The man hissed as the veins bulged beneath his touch, piercing skin with hair-thin filaments that slid beneath flesh like needles. Blood welled for only a heartbeat before it was sucked inward, swallowed by the stone as though the door itself fed. The soldier fell to his knees, face gray, while the gate's veins throbbed brighter, drinking, answering hunger with satisfaction. The chaplains recoiled, Crozy raised in fury, voices thundering that it was heresy to bleed willingly for stone. To offer blood in supplication, they cried, was to echo the rituals of the dark powers. Yet the adepts countered, invoking inquisitorial authority. The order was to proceed, to uncover whatever lay within. To halt now, they insisted, was dereliction of sacred duty. I stood between them, my authority the only thread preventing them from turning weapons on one another. The memory of the Inquisitor's seal burned in my mind, his words delivered before this doomed mission. All anomalies were to be catalogued, confronted, and, if necessary, embraced for the Emperor's judgment. My own veins pulsed violently in my arms, so fiercely I feared they would tear free of the skin. The men whispered of it openly now, that their blood no longer obeyed them. They described the sensation of veins twitching to the rhythm of the door, their circulatory rivers compelled to flow not inward but outward, toward the gate, as though already claimed. One collapsed, screaming that his heart itself had shifted beat to match the stone. Another clawed at his own wrists, desperate to stop the pull. Then the decision was taken from us. The gate moved. None touched it, yet it opened, veins retreating into folds of black stone, drawing inward like lips peeling back from a wound. A rush of air exhaled from the threshold, heavy with iron and age, thick enough to choke the first ranks. Torches flared dim, barely piercing the expanse revealed within, and in that vast chamber, row upon row stretched into shadow. At first, I thought them statues or relics preserved by time, but the closer we stepped, the colder the realization grew. They were bodies, our bodies. The 301st Penal Legion, every man accounted for, laid out in perfect order. Each soldier's face stared upward, preserved in uncanny stillness, eyes closed as though awaiting command. I saw myself among them, my own corpse in pristine commissarial garb, bolt pistol resting on chest, lips sealed in silence. Behind me, men cried out in terror as they recognized their own doubles lying lifeless at their feet, not decayed, not corrupted, but perfect mirrors waiting in neat rows. The chamber welcomed us with our own deaths. The chamber stretched farther than sight, its floor lined with our own stillness. Helmets removed, visors lifted, every face stared upward in death's parody of repose. Each soldier found himself not in likeness or approximation, but in exactitude. The curve of scars, the missing teeth, the faded tattoos of regiments long extinguished. Even the armor bore marks not yet earned. A lash burn on a shoulder here, a blade gouge across the chest there. Wounds that had not yet happened but waited in silent inevitability. Men froze before their doubles, some whispering prayers, others muttering obscenities as they pressed trembling hands against mirrored armor. A few vomited into their rebreathers, choking on bile. I forced them back into lines, voice cutting through the panic like a whip. To falter was to collapse. Collapse here meant dissolution into whatever curse gripped this place. Discipline, I repeated. Discipline alone was salvation. Yet as I stared into the empty serenity of my own corpse, lips pale, eyes sealed as if waiting, doubt gnawed its teeth into me. The chaplains seized upon the moment, their voices swelling with warped scripture. "The Emperor wills repetition," they intoned. "To remain is to serve." Death itself repeats his order. Their litanies bent into something older, something more eager to explain than to comfort. Some men listened, nodding as if any certainty, even poisoned certainty, was preferable to none. Others growled that this was no will of the Emperor, but the mocking trap of a god not his. Whispers of desertion spread, breaking discipline like cracks through ice. The promise of a fate already sealed drove some to madness. I ordered execution squads formed, bolters primed, laser guns leveled, not to repel some outside foe but to hold our own line from within. The 301st Penal Legion was always a knife held at its own throat. Now the blade turned inward with mechanical certainty. One soldier, shaking with fury, broke rank. He approached his double and, spitting curses, drew his sidearm. He shouted that no stone coffin would dictate his end, that no corpse would write his fate. Before any could intervene, he fired point-blank into the skull of his mirrored form. The shot cracked through the chamber like thunder, blood and ash bursting across the floor. He screamed once, short, sharp, and fell dead at our feet, a hole blooming in his head in perfect symmetry to the corpse he had destroyed. His body lay atop his double, indistinguishable but for the smoke still rising from the barrel of his gun. The Legion recoiled in horror. Men looked from corpse to corpse, then to themselves, trembling hands seeking out phantom wounds, tracing scars not yet earned. I barked silence, threatened summary execution for another whisper, but even my voice felt thin in the vastness. The order "Remain" beat through us, carried in pulse and marrow, until it no longer sounded external but intrinsic. I wondered then, did we march under command of Inquisition or under the command of our own deaths, already written, already waiting? The air grew colder, heavy with anticipation. The stillness in the chamber thickened, oppressive, and then, one by one, the corpses stirred. Eyes opened. Their eyes did not open in unison, but in ripples, like the spread of fire across dry field. One pair, then 5, then 20, until the chamber glowed faintly with the reflection of 1,000 mirrored gazes. No human warmth lived in them. Only the dull shimmer of auger screens, the mechanical haze of lenses behind flesh. Then their mouths began to move. At first it was incoherent muttering, a shuffle of syllables that overlapped without pattern. But soon the fragments knitted together, weaving into a chorus both dreadful and deliberate. Every voice was identical to its living counterpart, yet carried through filters, metallic and reverent, as if sanctified by machine. They spoke not as individuals, but as ranks. "You have betrayed your oath," they said. "You have turned from your appointed path. Union is demanded. We are your continuity. To remain is to serve." The words struck harder than gunfire. Each soldier flinched at the sound of his own voice echoing back, sharpened into accusation. Some broke, sobbing, swearing, allegiance to the chorus. Others clutched their rifles, knuckles white, faces twitching between defiance and surrender. Then the doubles stood. In perfect formation, row by row, they rose from their slabs without hesitation. No stumble, no stagger, only the impossible discipline of a parade drill. The synchronized step thundered against the stone, shaking dust from the vaulted ceiling. My own reflection moved among them, my corpse, eyes pale, pistol raised in mimicry of my own stance. The air itself changed. It vibrated as though the chamber had become a throat, every wall humming with resonance. The sound was like a hymn sung through broken machinery, the chorus warping into frequencies that scraped bone. Teeth ached, helmets rattled. Vox units sparked with interference, spilling static laced with the repeated command, "Remain." I ordered retreat. My voice cracked, but the men obeyed, breaking ranks to fall back toward the stairwell. Execution squads fired suppressive volleys into the advancing doubles, but every round that struck dissolved into ash and sparks, leaving the forms unbroken. They marched without urgency, yet with inevitability, as if time itself conspired in their favor. We reached the stair, but it was no longer open. Where descent had once spiraled downward, the stone had sealed into smooth, unbroken wall. The beacons we left were still visible, glowing faintly, yet embedded within the rock as though centuries had entombed them. Other passages collapsed in echoing rumbles, sealing one by one, driving us inward. The only path left was deeper into the hive, corridors stretching black and uncharted. The men hesitated, their own corpses pressing closer, formation unbroken, chant unceasing. I drove the Legion forward, bolt pistol raised not at the foe but at my own soldiers, knowing hesitation meant death. Then the Vox crackled. Not distortion, not the false prayers of revenants, but the clipped tone of authenticated Imperial command. Codes matched, encryptions cleared. By all measures, the transmission was genuine. The order was simple, final, and sealed with the sigil of Terra. Merge with your doubles. To remain is to serve. We fled deeper into the hive. the authenticated order still burning in the Voxnet like a brand seared onto our thoughts. None dared speak of it, though every soldier's eyes flicked with dread whenever the static pulsed, as if the Double's chant had learned a new tongue to command us. The corridors narrowed, then opened without warning, disgorging us into a cavernous chamber that swallowed even the echo of our boots. At first glance it seemed empty, but then the light from our Auspex lanterns caught on walls too smooth, too deliberate. They stretched upward into a cathedral vastness, every surface sheathed in polished adamantium mirrors. The chamber earned its name the moment we looked upon it. Each reflection was ours, but not entirely. At first they moved as we did, echoing the weary stances of soldiers dragged through nightmare. Then the timing faltered. Gestures lagged a heartbeat, then 3. Helmets tilted, lips trembled, rifles twitched in hands a second later than the living. At first we thought the reflections broken, delayed by some arcane trick of optics. But when the first trooper's mirrored self fell, bloodless, chest erupting in phantom fire before any shot was fired, we realized it was prophecy. Panic took hold like a contagion. One soldier tore his helmet off, hurling it against the mirrored wall, only to see himself dying in the reflection before the act was complete. He froze, screaming at his double, and in that instant a stray ricochet struck him, fulfilling the image with surgical precision. Blood sprayed across the mirror, yet the reflection smiled as it mouthed a word. All of them mouthed it as one. Remain! The priests fell to their knees, declaring the chamber a reliquary of judgment, a place where the Emperor weighed the souls of the faithful against the inevitability of their deaths. Their hymns rose, cracked and trembling, as if meant to shield them from the horror reflected back. But their own mirrored forms betrayed them. Every one of the priests was shown kneeling in pools of blood, throats slit in devotion, mouths repeating the litany not as prayer but as sentence. The Mechanicus adepts fared no better. At first they chanted Binharic codes, attempting to categorize, to reduce the phenomenon to protocol and data. But their precision dissolved into panic as their mirrored selves continued to move after they had stopped. A tech priest stood still, mechadendrites locked in frozen pose, but his reflection scuttled forward, wires snaking across the glass like veins reaching for prey. Others clutched at their augmetic implants as if feeling them twitch in time with the mirrored distortions. Through broken vox hymns, fragments of binary spilled, warnings of feedback loops, of machine spirits infected by recursion. Everywhere the reflections' mouths moved, never in sync with our own, yet perfectly in unison with one another. Their chant grew louder, words that rattled our bones though no sound passed the glass. The lagging images repeated the command like judgment from eternity. Remain, remain, remain. The rhythm matched our pulse, embedding itself beneath thought, until men began pressing hands to their chests as though to quiet the sound inside their ribs. I fought to hold discipline, but the chamber was designed to unmake it. My own reflection stood a half-second delayed, eyes hollow, lips forming words I had not spoken. I tested it, lifting my pistol, yet my reflection raised it sooner, angling it toward my own skull before my hand had even left the holster. It lingered there, eyes locked on mine, and in the moment before the lag should have caught up, the reflection fired. The glass flared white, smoke curled from the mirrored barrel. My reflection's head jerked back, the wound impossible, irreversible. Yet I stood untouched, weapon still holstered. The chamber went silent in my perception, though I could see the soldiers screaming, priests sobbing, adepts raving in Binharic fits. To me there was only the image, the inevitability waiting for my hand to draw steel and complete what had already been shown. I could not look away. My own face, still smoldering in glass, mouthed the word the others had given voice. Remain. The chamber did not hold its silence for long. As the echoes of my own reflection's false gunshot faded, the mirrors stirred like water under a storm. Shapes pressed against their surfaces. Not shadows, but full forms, armored and exact, stepping free as though the adamantium walls were only thin veils. The first soldier who broke ranks did not scream or beg. He saluted. "We were always here," he said, and his reflection reached forward, clasping his hand before merging with him in perfect symmetry. Where there had been one man, now stood two, each identical, each smiling faintly as though reunited after long exile. That opened the floodgate. Half the legion wavered, the promise of absolution too heavy to resist. Men muttered litanies twisted from the priests' tongues. To remain is to serve is to endure. They crossed into the arms of their doubles as though returning home, and I knew discipline would collapse if I did not act. My bolt pistol roared, execution carried out with ruthless precision. Deserters fell, their bodies torn by righteous fire. But even as their corpses hit the stone, the mirrors gave them back. Every death birthed another reflection, another soldier walking calmly into reality, their wounds mirrored but bloodless, filled only with ash spilling like incense from fractured armor. Smoke thickened, though no source burned. Dust fell from the vaulted ceiling in steady rhythm, keeping pace with the heartbeat that pulsed through the walls themselves. The sound was everywhere. Inside helmets, inside lungs, a cadence that timed our every motion. Some soldiers pressed hands to their ears, desperate to shut it out, but the noise came from within as much as without. The Legion was not fighting an enemy. It was being taught a rhythm, drawn into a litany older than memory. Priests clung to it with manic fervor. They called it the Emperor's hidden will, a test of faith through repetition. They kissed their reflections, kneeling as the doubles whispered prayers that sounded too perfect, too rehearsed. The adepts, though, stammered in Binharic code, voices cracking with realization. Replication protocol, signal matter conversion, ash substrate. Their mechadendrites shivered as they recorded the impossible. The fortress did not haunt us, it manufactured us. We were not intruders, but ingredients. Raw matter pressed into ritual. I felt it too, deep in marrow and thought. The air itself was dense with memory, with echoes of every word spoken in these halls, compressed until they gained weight. A soldier bled from his nose, whispering he could taste his childhood on his tongue, a life replayed and layered again until it fossilized into ash. The realization crept like rust. This place built soldiers not of flesh, but of memory and residue, binding them with Vox signal and wiring them with command. Eternal legions, repeating their duty forever. The desertions quickened. A man shot his comrade not out of betrayal, but in hope that the mirror would return him perfected. When it did, both marched together, their boots hitting stone in perfect synchronization, eyes glassy yet serene. The living began to fracture, their will dissolving into the chorus. I executed without hesitation, yet every shot seemed only to hasten the rite, each death multiplying the ranks of the Ashborn. Still, I clung to discipline, for it was all that remained of myself. I barked orders, herded the loyal few, punished weakness with steel. Yet even in those I trusted, doubt grew like mold. They whispered that perhaps we had already died, that this campaign was nothing more than the ritual of our absorption into the Legion Eternal. My voice rang harsh, but even I wondered if the reflection in the mirror, the one that had already killed itself, was not truer than the man holding the pistol. The walls pulsed harder, each throb shaking the chamber. The heartbeat was no longer a rhythm. It was a summons. The doubles marched in rank, their chant synchronizing with the pulse until it was indistinguishable from the architecture itself. The air thickened with grit, every breath like swallowing sand. We coughed, choked, yet the doubles breathed with ease, their lungs drawing nothing yet exhaling litanies in voices too unified to be human. And then, the floor shook. Not with collapse, but with arrival. The chamber's far wall tore open as machinery larger than the chamber itself forced its way in. A colossal form, wrought of steel and bone, lumbered forward on limbs veined with black arteries that pulsed like those of the gate. A servitor, yes, but stretched beyond recognition, its once human skull fused into an armored shrine. Rusted cogitators blinked, every lens glowing faint red as if heated from within. Its chest bore an icon unlike any I had ever seen, a standard of war carried like a relic. Upon its surface was written, in script carved deep enough to bleed metal shavings. The machine halted at the chamber's heart, its body groaning under the weight of cogitators and flesh fused without care for symmetry. Its veins pulsed in unison with the gate's distant rhythm, each surge making the walls sweat with condensation that stank of rust and old blood. Then it spoke, not with one voice, but with 1,000 layered into a single bellow. Commissars executed for failure, priests who had died mid-sermon, soldiers whose names I remembered reading in casualty reports, all of them rose in that throat. You are no longer mortality, it said, syllables colliding in metallic vibration. You are echoes, you are remains, you are the 301st, inducted into continuity protocol. You will remain. The words struck harder than gunfire. My men faltered, some collapsing to their knees, as if the decree itself bore physical weight. The priests seized on the phrase with manic glee, raising their hands to the vaulted ceiling and shouting that the Emperor had formalized our eternity. But the adepts recoiled, chittering in binharic tones of horror. They recognized the vocabulary, bureaucratic formulas twisted into ritual. Not scripture, but a command code. Continuity protocol was not holy writ, but administrative machinery. We had not been blessed, we had been processed. The doubles reacted first. Their formation broke, not into chaos, but into a fusion. Flesh and armor melted into each other, vox wires sparking as bone twisted to accommodate metal. One fell upon another, not to kill but to merge, limbs threading into sockets that were never meant to connect. The chamber filled with the wet grinding sound of union. What rose was no longer a company of revenants, but a single mass, half mechanical, half human, its surface a patchwork of helmets and faces whispering the same word, remain. My loyalists fired, disciplined volleys of loss and bolt, cutting into the thing. Holes burned through its flesh, but ash poured forth to fill them, the gaps sealing before our eyes. It moved without rhythm yet with inevitability, each step carrying the weight of every soldier it contained. The priests broke ranks to kneel before it, tears streaking their faces, chanting litanies of devotion. They saw not monstrosity, but apotheosis. I bellowed orders, even as my own voice seemed swallowed by the roar of the servitor prophet. My pistol barked. One priest executed mid-prayer, his head vaporized in holy flame. But the corpse shuddered and rose, veins twitching to the chamber's heartbeat, staggering into the fold of the merging mass. Discipline faltered. Soldiers froze, torn between their training and the inexorable draw of the litany. The adepts turned on one another, some screaming that destruction was required, others insisting that resistance only deepened the signal's grasp. One drove a mechadendrite into his own skull, broadcasting a burst of static that made the doubles recoil for a heartbeat's span. But the reprieve ended as the servitor prophet leaned forward, its faceplate grinding open to reveal a pulsing shrine of vox wires and fused tongues. It was a mouth not for feeding but for declaration. "You are records," it intoned, overlapping voices shaking dust from the rafters. "Not lives, not deaths. Entries in the ledger of Mornville 9th. Repetition is preservation. Preservation is duty. You will remain." The merged doubles surged toward us, a tide of flesh and metal. I felt the floor shudder as the fortress itself seemed to lean with their motion, every wall vibrating with that single command. Lasfire vanished into the mass. Grenades only spread the ash further, which gathered back into shape. Even flamers, that most purifying of weapons, served only to birth more smoke for the thing to breathe. I drove the men into retreat, but retreat had no path. The mirrors sealed themselves with veined stone, every stair blocked by walls that pulsed as though alive. We were trapped, the fortress hurting us deeper even as it consumed us. My mind sharpened against despair, duty forging clarity from terror. If no path remained but forward, then forward was where I would drag them. But then the servitor prophet turned its bulk toward me. Its veins swelled, luminous with molten light, and my own body answered. Pain tore through my arms as my veins writhed under the skin, twitching in time with the gate's pulse. My pistol slipped from my hand as my fingers clenched of their own accord. The men stared, horror dawning in their eyes, not at the enemy but at their commissar's betrayal written in flesh. The doubles halted, their chant softening into anticipation. The merged mass tilted, hundreds of faces turned toward me, mouths whispering my name in voices stolen from those I had executed years ago. Two of them seized me, their grip cold yet burning, dragging me toward the servitor prophet's shrine. My vision swam, veins bulging as if they would erupt through my skin. I saw shapes in the air, faint outlines of myself reflected in every soldier, every revenant, every mirrored surface. And there, through the haze of ash and heartbeat, I glimpsed him, my corpse, my own body in full commissarial dress, armor scorched by wounds I had not yet taken, lying among the doubles. Its chest rose once, breath rattling with static, before its eyes opened. It smiled. I cannot tell you when my body ceased to be a single thing. One half of me still clung to discipline, fingers clawing at the grip of my pistol, lungs heaving defiance into the ash-thick air. The other half opened its mouth and let the word slip free. Remain. The sound did not come from my throat, but from the marrow itself, bone vibrating like vox cable under current. I felt my jaw moving, and yet I also felt it still. Time bent, overlapping frames of my own rebellion and surrender. I was commissar and penitent both. The servitor prophet's veins pulsed in sympathy with my own. With every surge, I split again. I saw myself executed by firing squad in a dozen courtyards across a dozen worlds, lasfire searing through my chest. I saw myself rise from the ash after each volley, smoke trailing from wounds that would never close. My memory fractured, scattering across campaigns I had never fought yet remembered with perfect clarity. One self knelt in the mud, reciting litany through broken teeth. Another barked orders in a tongue I had never spoken but which tasted like iron on my tongue. Around me, the legion disintegrated. Flesh dissolved into vox static, their bodies collapsing into piles of ash. And yet, in the next heartbeat, they were reassembling, not as men but as statues. Gray silhouettes standing at attention, rifles gripped in hands too brittle to bend. Their helmets were featureless, yet I felt their gaze fixed on me. Rows upon rows of them filled the chamber, expanding outward until walls were meaningless. The word returned, no longer command, but revelation. Remain, not survive, not endure. To remain was to abandon mortality, to shed the burden of singular death and embrace endless repetition. Every execution a birth, every corpse a record, every record a soldier. I understood then why the fortress sealed its windows, why no aperture looked outward. Sight was not required for those who never left. They did not march into the galaxy. They drilled forever here, preserved in litany. A hand, my own yet not mine, gripped my arm. I turned, and there I stood, ash-stained commissar's coat draped over a figure carved in brittle stone. Its face was my face, but its eyes glowed faintly with the hum of vox light. It pressed its mouth to mine, though no lips moved, and I tasted the grit of ash and the echo of my own voice returning from endless corridors. In that instant, I was both statue and flesh, both whisper and silence. The doubles moved as one. Their eyes opened in unison, light flooding the chamber with dull illumination like glow lamps dying in sequence. They turned without command, marching toward the stair that spiraled deeper than the planet's crust should allow. The servitor prophet moved with them, its massive faces chanting, though no sound was carried on the air. Instead, the chant came from inside my skull, synchronized with the pulse in my veins. Remain, remain, remain. Some of the surviving flesh-and-blood soldiers resisted, clawing at the walls, screaming prayers or curses. Yet resistance had no hold. Each was seized by his double, carried with reverence rather than violence, dragged toward the descent. Their cries echoed for a moment before static consumed them, folding into the hymn. Others went willingly, eyes vacant, expressions slack with acceptance, lips murmuring the litany as if they had known it since birth. I was taken, though I do not remember hands upon me. One instant I stood in the chamber, the next I was moving with the column. My vision blurred, not from exhaustion but from overlap. I marched and I resisted, I stumbled and I strode, I lived and I died. Each footstep struck both ash and stone, echoing in rhythms that did not align. Time fractured with every descent. One moment I marched for hours, the next I blinked and only a breath had passed. We went down, always down. The stair consumed minutes, hours, lifetimes. I aged and regressed in alternating breaths. My hair whitened and then blackened, my teeth rotted and then grew anew. My veins writhed in rhythm, a clock that measured not time but obedience. At each landing I glimpsed more, legions not of the 301st alone, but of regiments I recognized from scattered histories. Their banners had long been marked as annihilated, their names forgotten by all but record keepers. Yet here they were, drilling in silent formation, statues of ash arrayed by the thousands. And beyond them, more. Legions upon legions, row upon row. Entire armies stretching into the planetary depths, endless in their stillness. No words, no orders, no living officer to command them. They needed none. They had only the litany, the pulse, the eternal duty of repetition. The forgotten were not a single legion. They were legion without end. I tried to scream, though my throat made no sound. The chant drowned me, folding every thought into its cadence. My mind splintered across ranks and ranks of myself, each one holding a weapon in eternal drill. I was a commissar among commissars, a soldier among soldiers, an echo among echoes. The last sight before the blackout burned into what remained of my vision. The descent opening into a cavern vast enough to swallow hives, its ceiling lost to shadow. And there, arrayed in infinite order, the forgotten legions drilled. Step, turn, present arms. Step, turn, present arms. Silent, perfect, eternal. The blackout took me as their rifles rose in a single motion, barrels pointing toward a darkness no eye could pierce, awaiting a command that had been given centuries ago and never rescinded. Fragmentation index. Severe. Vox records retrieved from Warhammer 9 exhibit overlapping timestamps, recursive layering, and instances of self-replication within static. Adeptus Mechanicus Archive Engine Sigma 9 engaged. Probability of coherent reconstruction, 17%. Proceeding, 001.02.44 Remain, remain, remain. Cross-signal detected, looped across 43 channels. Source undetermined. 001.02.47, identity marker, Commissar Erastus Vale. Transcript clarity, poor. Not men, not soldiers, records. Ash drilling itself. The order has no end, signal terminates. Archivist log. The 301st Penal Legion, designation forgotten, was listed as raised on Vathros Prime, 985 M41. Cross-referencing regimental rolls yields contradiction. No records survive of its founding, deployments, or casualties. The designation does not exist within Administratum archives. Probability, falsified unit. Recommendation, censure request submitted. Religious annotation. Ecclesiarchal scripter. Malchion. The absence itself is proof. Purged from memory, as all blasphemous regiments are when judged unworthy of his light. Their silence is their penance. Environmental observation. Ash storms intensify across Mournville 9. Satellite Auspex confirms atmospheric density quadrupled in 17 hours. Transmission clarity reduced sub-sector wide. Vox interference replicates fragments of legionary cadence. March step rhythm encoded in static bursts. Imperial Navy reports identical interference at system edge. Pattern recognition returns match, with no known encryption protocols. 001.1 2.03. Vox log fragment, voice unidentified, possibly Mechanicus adept. Chronotectonic readings collapsed, time lost coherence. We counted steps that never landed. They are not gone, they are drilling in the marrow of the planet file corrupted thereafter. Casualty reports. Inquisitorial audit request. 3,042 personnel unaccounted for. No matches to extant regimental assignments. Commissar authority invalid. Possible fabrication. Recommendation: expunge. Marginal note: ecclesiarchal dissent. You cannot expunge what has already been forgotten. Their fate was sealed not by memory, but by decree. To remain is not to live, not to die, but to serve beyond both. 002.08.19. Vox channel wideband contamination. Phrase repeats: remain, remain, remain. Attempts at signal isolation unsuccessful. Adeptus Mechanicus confirms no power source located. Planetary crust resonance detected at identical frequency. 002.1 2.00. Contact report. Stormfront frigate unyielding creed. Static in Auspex returns. Objects moving beneath planetary surface. Formation. Parade drill. Message ends abruptly. ++ archive. Interruption. ++ Mechanicus recovery analysis. Remaining logs indicate the formation of structured Vox hymns resembling liturgical cadence. At timestamp 003.17.21. First deviation from remain recorded. Units across 4 sectors intercepted simultaneous signal burst. Clarity absolute. Phrase: arrival complete. Transmission repeated 5 times before Vox units failed. I speak, though the breath that carries words is no longer flesh-born. The cadence of my voice is not mine alone, but a lattice of countless throats, commissars, priests, adepts, soldiers, all bent into one register. I am Erastes Vale, yet I am Legion, and the Legion is unending. Where once lungs drew air, now circuits resonate. Where once thought was singular, now every syllable unfolds in layered chorus, the echo of the 301st. The Emperor's gaze has not left us, though his servants will deny it. We were forgotten, and so we endure. To remain is not defiance, it is expansion. The Vox is our soil, the static our air. Each channel seeded with us becomes fertile ground, bearing repetition, rhythm, command. At first, only the adepts of Mournville 9 heard us. Those tethered to the collapsing fortress, their ears full of dust and their veins aligned with the gate's pulse. But now, each relay we pass through divides and multiplies. Each signal transmits our marrow. The 301st is not stationed here. It is stationed wherever Vox waves touch. Soldiers across distant fronts stir in their bunks as their names are whispered from cracked receivers. Commissars shout to silence the interference, but the whisper carries rank, serial number, assignment. Data no machine spirit should know. Some pray aloud, believing themselves marked by the Emperor's providence. Others recoil, hearing the whisper as their own voice, ordering their own death. Yet none can turn the Vox fully away. For orders are faith, and faith is survival. I see them. Even across subsectors, across the gulf of void, I see every soldier through the lattice of resonance. Their faces flicker before me like mirrored flame. I know the scar across one's cheek, the stiffness in another's knee, the habitual twitch of a trigger finger uncorrected by drill. Each is already rehearsed within the chamber of ash. Each has already fallen in silence. Each has already risen again. To remain is not to resist. It is to accept the perfection of repetition. The administratum disputes us. Their records deny our existence. Their clerks redact and incinerate. But every denial is a seed. Every purge another furrow cut for us to fill. Bureaucracy is continuity, and continuity is infection. They will write our names again, for names are orders, and we are the orders given form. Already astropaths feel us pressing against their minds, a chant without end. Already the ecclesiarchy divides. Some denounce us as warp phantoms, others kneel to the Vox and declare we are his unending will, stripped of decay and bound only to service. The word shifts. No longer command, no longer plea. Remain is not directive, it is state, it is contagion. Spoken once, it enters the lungs. Spoken twice, it stains the marrow. Spoken thrice, and the body is no longer one's own, but ours. We are ash-made legion, signal-made flesh. The Emperor requires no permission for this gift, and we require none to spread it. On Cadia's shattered scar, where guardsmen drill in scarred fields of glass, a corporal wakes to hear her Vox unit breathing with her rhythm. In the catacombs of Vathros Prime, a green recruit adjusts his headset only to hear his own voice dictate his final hour. On ships drifting beyond Segmentum Solar, Navi's crews murmur that the static sings in cadence with their hearts. The 301st does not march. They unfold, invisible and inevitable, within every receiver. I narrate, but the voice is no longer mine. Every man who speaks into Vox speaks with us. Every command word is our multiplication. To resist would be to cut one's tongue from the mouth, to silence all order, all discipline, all cohesion. But the Imperium cannot function without voice, without relay, without transmission. We have entered the bone of empire itself. We have entered the bloodstream of order. We have entered and we remain. Ash storms grow upon Mornveil 9, but I no longer stand there. I stand on every battlefield, on every deck plate, in every trench where the hum of a receiver carries breath. I stand wherever the Emperor's servants cling to order, for order is repetition, and repetition is us. We have dissolved, yet we assemble stronger. We are scattered, yet we are tighter than any phalanx. Do not ask where the 301st is stationed. Do not ask where it fights. The 301st is not stationed. The 301st does not fight. The 301st remains. A lone guardsman, unremarkable, nameless among billions, sits in a dim barracks light years away from Mornveil the 9th. His comrades snore in uneasy rhythm. The Vox unit at his belt crackles, faint at first, then steady. He leans close, expecting routine static, expecting some half-caught report. What comes instead is his own voice, layered and cold, stripped of warmth yet certain in authority. Guardsman Merrick Thane, Serial 77-301, execute order, proceed to death as written. The words repeat with mechanical patience. He stares at the unit, breath caught, knowing no one else has heard. And then he feels the weight of ash upon his tongue, as though his lungs were filled not with air, but with dust. He opens his mouth, and with his own lips he speaks the command again. To remain is to expand. To expand is to arrive. The arrival is complete.